Hello and welcome to Vignettes of Landscape Photography behind the scenes. In this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the gear that I used to make this series. Now if all you're interested in is still photography and you have no interest in gear, then by all means tune out and watch another one of my videos. But if you are interested in the gear that I used to make this series, then stay tuned. Okay, I'm going to split this video up into two parts. In the first part, we're going to cover all the video equipment that I used in this series. So this is cameras, lenses, heads, gimbals, etc. And then in part two, I'll talk about the kit that I used to create the still images. So again, this will be about cameras and lenses and tripods, etc. But why don't we make a start and talk about video equipment. So video cameras, I used 4 different video capture devices to create this particular series. I shot everything on all of those cameras in 4K 25 frames a second. Now I had to make a bit of a decision. A lot of the cameras that I used that shoot 4K will also shoot 1080p at 50 frames a second. So I could have produced a video in 1080p and also used some slow-mo footage as well. But I wanted to go for resolution for this series, so that's why I've shot everything at 4K 25 frames a second. Unfortunately, none of the cameras that I use shoot 4K at 50 frames a second. Maybe that's something I'll get to do in series 2. But let's talk about the first of the cameras. Right, the first camera I want to talk about is the one that I'm actually filming with just now, and that's the Panasonic Lumix G80, or the G85 if you're in some regions of the globe. Now this has been my vlogging camera for a little bit of time now. It shoots 4K footage at 25 frames a second at 100 megabits, so it's pretty decent quality. The lens I've got on the front is just the kit lens I got, which is a 12-60 variable aperture lens. On the whole, I shot probably about 75% of the footage with this camera. It's nice and light, so it's nice and easy for me to move about with and change compositions and change shots. So not much more else to say for that, but that's my kind of go-to camera for the video series. Right, moving on to the slightly bigger camera, I did shoot a fair amount of footage with my Nikon D850, which also shoots 4K at 25 frames a second. Now I used 2 different lenses when I was using this camera. Most of the time when I was using the D850, I used 24-70 f2.8. Now the reason I used this combination, it's quite a bit heavier, so I didn't use it as much, but the reason I used this combination was to get some close-up shots. So obviously having quite a good focal length and a wide aperture, I could zoom quite closely in, and it also allowed me to get some good depth of field shots. So quite a bit trickier to get depth of field on the G80 with that kit lens, but with the 24-70 2.8, I was able to focus in on certain subjects and give a nice depth of field effect. The other lens that I did use with the Nikon D850, but less so, was my trusty old 16-35 f4. I used this lens mostly when I was wanting to get some wide shots and when I was using it with the gimbal. Now I'm going to talk about the gimbal in just a minute. That's a new bit of kit for my bag. So yeah, the Nikon D850 with a 24-70 and a 16-35. Now the smallest camera in my kit bag is this. This is my Yi Action Cam. I've had this for quite a few years. It's had quite a tough life. Now quite small. It's kind of like a GoPro-esque camera. It shoots 4K 25 frames a second, but it's got a very wide field of view. You know, the video quality of it is okay. It doesn't work particularly well in high dynamic scenes. But why would I use this camera? Well, I use the time-lapse feature in this camera. So in the video, you've seen quite a few time lapses put in there. This makes it nice and easy. I don't have to do any processing back at home. I can just set this to time-lapse mode and it will record a time-lapse sequence for me for as long as I want, and then actually just create a nice 4K 25 frames a second video file for me to insert straight into my timeline. So this is a particularly handy bit of kit. And last but not least, it's the DJI Mavic Pro, a drone of course. Now I've used this reasonably sparingly at a lot of the locations that I visited. You weren't allowed to fly them, or for example when I was at Bottleneck, I was right in the middle of actually just on the edge of a no-fly zone, so I used some apps to check before I flew that I was in restricted airspace, and sure enough it immediately came up and told me. So it's always good to check out where you're flying. So I had limited use, but some of the shots that I did get, you know, no need to fly it particularly high actually. You know, a lot of the best shots are done low level, so where I could fly it, I used it to create a sort of a sense of place and about where I was. But yeah, always a really handy kit, even though I use it quite sparingly. So that's the camera gear that I used. Now I did handhold some of it, but most of it would have been shot on a tripod. Now for the shots with the Nikon D850, obviously being a slightly heavier camera load, I used my main stills tripod, which is a Gitzo, very well suited, got a geared head, supports nice heavy workloads, made it real easy to position the camera to get the framing and the focus right. For the G80, I would have used my little Manfrotto B3 tripod, which I've got a fluid head on, which is what I'm actually filming on just now. And that allows me to gently pan up and down and across left and right. I used that for the majority of the shots in some of the earlier videos. So obviously using a fluid head gives me much smoother motion as I would do if I was just using a normal head. But in some of the later videos, I actually used a completely different bit of kit. Okay, let's talk about the most exciting bit of kit that I used in creating this video series, and this is the gimbal, my AK2000 from FeiyuTech. Right, so the gimbal is a relatively new bit of kit in my bag. I was actually halfway through filming this video series when FeiyuTech reached out to me and said, would you like to try one of our gimbals? And I thought, well, that's perfect timing. So they sent me out the AK2000 and I used it for the last few videos in the series. Now, I'm not actually going to review it in this video. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I used it, the types of shots that it helped me get, and some of the pros and cons of using a gimbal in the field. Right, so what does a gimbal do? Well, basically, it allows me to get stabilized footage. I don't know if you can see it here, but if I move the camera about, it kind of keeps my video camera in a stable orientation, so I can get nice smooth shots. Means I can walk forward with it, backwards, I can pan it up and down, move it up and down, I can do all sorts of cool shots with it. So it just allows me to get a bit more creative and give my shots a bit more of a professional look. Now I used two cameras with the AK2000 gimbal. I used the Panasonic G80, which I'm filming on just now, and the Nikon D850 with the 16-35 lens on it. I think I preferred shooting with the Nikon and the 16-35 lens. It was because it's actually a slightly heavier camera, and the balance between the actual weight of the lens and the weight of the camera, it was much easier to balance out on the gimbal compared to the G80 because the body compared to the kit lens, which is really light, made it quite a bit more difficult to get in a balanced state. So what type of shots did I take with the gimbal? Well, there were three principal shots that I took. The first one was the walking shot, so I put that forward like that. As you can see, it's got some automated functions there. There's a little control column down here with a touch display, and I can use this to modify the behavior of the gimbal. But the first one was the walking forward shot, so I'll put one of those up on the screen just now, and that just really smoothed out the action of me walking forward and moving side to side. So that was one of the shots that I took. One of the other shots that I really liked was give a nice cinematic look, was I'd point the camera down like that. Now again, I'll put a clip up on the screen to demonstrate, and then as I pan the camera up, you can see it keeps the head nice and steady in a forward facing position. That gave me that nice kind of rising shot that I used a couple of times as well. Really like that shot. Now the third type of shot that I'd used one of the pan-in shots as well. So there's a little joystick down here, and what I can do is I can get the gimbal to pan round automatically. So I use that for creating some pan-in shots, and you can go up and down. It gives me quite a bit of versatility there with my shots. So, like I said, I've got a touch panel on the kind of control column here of the gimbal, but there's also an app that goes with it as well, and that can connect over Bluetooth. And from the app that you can use it to control the gimbal head as well, and you can get to pan up, down, left and right. And I used that in a couple of shots as well to pan round the scene to give me a nice smooth action. So that's a lot better than hand holding the camera and going like that, which could be a little bit wobbly. It's nice and smooth, and you put the gimbal on a flat surface, and you can just use either, like I say, the joystick on the control column, or you can use the app and you can remotely control the panning of the camera. But it's not without its compromises or complications. For me, the biggest one was weight. It is quite heavy, and particularly if you put a Nikon D850 and a lens on it, that combination to handhold, you know, I'm not sure what the weight is, but it's reasonably heavy. So walking around for long periods of time with the gimbal can get a bit of a strain. The other thing is, I did find it, like I said earlier, a little bit difficult to balance a lightweight camera like the G80, even though it's well within the weight limits of the gimbal. That's why I eventually just stuck to shoot most of the footage with a Nikon D850. The other challenge I had with the gimbal was, In a studio environment like this, where I've got the gimbal on its tripod legs, sat all nice and balanced, it's really easy to balance out the camera and adjust the weights so it sits perfectly. Out in the field, you know, sometimes you've got to fold the gimbal away to pack it in its packing case to take with you, so then you've got to reconstruct it, which only takes a few seconds, but then you've got to rebalance it. And that can be quite difficult, particularly in some of the locations I go to. They're quite uneven, so actually finding a flat surface and then trying to rebalance the gimbal when you're outside and you're dealing with wind, it can be a little bit tricky. And talking of wind as well, if I had the gimbal sat there on its tripod legs and I'm trying to do an auto rotation, what I find is in windy conditions, it does actually wobble the head about a bit. So, you know, actually getting those nice sweeping panoramic shots with the gimbal head only tends to work well in some sort of light wind conditions. I found that the strong wind would just actually cause the gimbal to move itself, and then you can get a jittery video. The other feature of the gimbal that I couldn't test was actually the remote control feature. So there are various remote connections you can put directly into your camera, so you can adjust things like aperture and focus and exposure all directly from the controls on the gimbal head. Neither my Nikon D850 or my G80 were compatible with this, so I was unable to test that, unfortunately. All that aside, I really enjoyed using the AK2000. It really allowed me to get some silky smooth shots, particularly the pan-up shots and the walking shots. These are shots that I simply wouldn't have been able to get just hand-holding the camera, and particularly when I did actually be able to use it for automatically panning around, gave me some nice smooth shots. So, you know, I wouldn't do without it. I wouldn't take it out in every shoot because of the weight and the setup that's required to get it done. But, you know, if I want to do probably another series like this is definitely going to be in my kit bag. Okay, I think that's everything for video. I've covered cameras, lenses, gimbals, tripods, everything else. Didn't have to worry about mics because there's no audio in this video, and didn't have to use any artificial lighting as well. So things were relatively straightforward. Now, if you've got any questions about any of the video equipment that I used, including the AK2000, you want to know about any things like settings that I may have set on the camera, please do drop me a comment below. But why don't we have a talk about stills photography next? Okay, let's talk about stills photography. Relatively simple here because I haven't bought any new gear or got any new gear to capture the still images. I shot everything. All the still images are shot with my trusty old Nikon D850 here. Now, using a combination of either the Nikon 16-35 f4 lens here or the 24-70 f2.8. Now, I did take one image with the DJI Mavic Pro, but that was just the one. All the rest were taken with the Nikon D850. Other equipment I used with the Nikon D850 almost always used a cable release. I also would have used a filter, so you can see here that because of the red cap here, I use the case filter system. Now, if you want to know more about my thoughts on the case filter system, I did actually recently produce a video for that. I'll include a link for that up in the corner of the screen. But effectively, most shots were taken with the circular polarizer attached, and then with the filter holder, I either would have used a grad and or a combination of neutral density filters. Last but not least is the tripod. I almost always use a tripod to capture landscape photographs. I'm using one right now. It's my Gitzo, and that's got the Panasonic G80 on the top of it. But I almost always use a tripod for stability. The head that I use this Manfrotto geared head. I've had this for years now. Yeah, it's heavy and it's clunky, but it's absolutely solid, and the twist knobs allow very fine precision changes in the composition. I absolutely love this head and love shooting with it. Okay, that's it for stills gear. Nothing really that I don't normally use there. That's all the standard gear that I take when I'm going out and taking landscape photographs. Right, I do hope you enjoyed this kind of behind the scenes look at the gear that I used for creating this video series. Most of the gear, virtually all of it, I already owned and was using in the production of my videos anyway. The only new addition was thanks to the guys at FeiyuTech for sending me that AK2000. It was really good being able to use a gimbal for the first time and create some nice cinematic shots. I'm really hoping to put it to even greater use if I do a series too. Now, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you've got any questions about any of the video gear that I used, or any of the stills camera gear, or any questions about the production of Vignettes of Landscape Photography series, please do leave me a comment below. But hopefully you've enjoyed the video series, you've enjoyed this behind the scenes look, and I'll hopefully see you in series 2.